You know Gray Bar for electrical parts, but there's one more thing you may not be thinking of us for that can help maximize your next project's total value. Our pre-project planning services are designed to help you win the bid, save on labor costs, and keep your installers productive across your entire build. The sooner you call us, the better. Because when we're there from the beginning, we can anticipate your needs and help you solve problems before they become problems. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
Welcome into a very special edition of the show before the show, the Minor League Baseball podcast. We're all primped and ready. Sam and I recording, 2,000 miles away from each other, just decked out tuxedos and shiny shoes and everything because we are talking Minor League Baseball awards today, the MiLBY Awards. You can vote now at MiLB.com/MiLBY for your favorites for the 2015 minor league season in all kinds of categories. We're going to go over all of them. Sam, how are you? How's your tuxedo fitting?
It's perfect. I'm surprised. I don't think I've ever had a tuxedo fit this
It's well
way.
Tailored.
Yeah, I won't exactly say I'm dressed to the nines, maybe dressed to the sevens or eights. But,
okay.
I'll take that. It has that feel of, they announced the nominees for the Oscars and everybody wakes up early on the West Coast. And
yeah.
They've got these famous people announcing, who the nominees are, and I don't know if we quite fit like the profile of like a Rob Lowe or somebody would wake up that early to do it. But this is our day for this, and I'm excited.
We are we're gonna have a whole pile of fun with it because there are a lot of contenders in all these categories who are very deserving. Really, throughout all of these, you look at the ballot, and again, you can go to MiLB.com/MiLBYs, and it's just one more difficult to decide than the next. And but we're gonna help you. We'll talk you through it. And, this will be like good therapy for us as we get started here on the 27th edition of the show before the show. As this has been, throughout this entire season, we've had this conversation about virtually everything. Like, oh, man, it's so tough to pick blank about whether it's, this is a guy who, it really blew up at the start of the season. He kind of stood out as the best player in this organization or in this league or whatever it is. Now we get to throw everything into a pot, and we get to discuss who the top performers in all minor league baseball are. And we're going to talk about a guy who we had on last week's edition of the show, Blake Snell. We'll talk about some people who we've had on other episodes of the show this season. But before we dive into all that, you can subscribe, rate, and review the podcast at iTunes. The Minor League Baseball podcast is there. You can find us there. You can leave us a rating and a review and grab a subscription while you're there. You can also check out the podcast on iTunes. I misspoke, or on the site, at MiLB.com. I misspoke before. It's episode number 28, not number 27. So we're right on track with me forgetting which episode it is. And let's get into it.
Like none other. It's us forgetting where we are.
That's exactly. That is, if there's one thing week to week you can count on with a minor league podcast, it is that we will forget which episode number we are on. But let's jump right into it. Let's dive in with our very first category, and why not start with last week's interview subject who highlights one of these groups. We'll talk a couple of pitching categories first, and then top offensive player, but top starting pitcher. Last week on the podcast, we had Tampa Bay Rays pitching prospect Blake Snell, the left-hander who just blew up in really his second straight breakout campaign. But I think the way we'll do this conversation is I'm going to read off the nominees. I'll have Sam give you his take on kind of the favorites that he sees in the category. I'll give you some people who stand out to me, and we'll move on to the next one. So let's get started with top starting pitcher of the 2015 season. If we had a really good big production staff, I would put in like drum roll here and like the nominees are. Thank you, Sam.
See? On my lap. I don't know if I'm going to do this for every category. We have a lot of categories.
You're going to be bruised by the end of the day.
Just cut that out and place it over everything. And that's we'll use technology to make this happen.
Done. And done. Starting things off, Jose Berrios of the Minnesota Twins organization, AA and AAA combined this season, 14-5, a 2.87 ERA. Matt Boyd, left-handed pitcher in the Detroit Tigers organization, who was part of the deal that sent David Price to the Toronto Blue Jays. He was formerly a Blue Jays prospect, moved over to the Tigers at the deadline this season. Jose De Leon in the Los Angeles Dodgers system, spent this season a little bit in Class A advanced in the California League, 7 starts there, then jumped up to Double A in the Texas League. Jacob Faria, this is going to become a theme. Tampa Bay Rays prospects are rising quickly on the pitching side. Faria, who is one of those guys who's pretty much off the radar coming into this season, but 17-4 with a 1.92 ERA, made 10 starts for Class A advanced Charlotte, and then jumped up to Double A Montgomery and was fantastic this year, or I should say earned 10 wins for Class A advanced Charlotte, and then got 7 more with Double A Montgomery. The Detroit Tigers' Michael Fulmer, another trade acquisition. He was brought over in the Yoenis Cespedes deal. Tyler Glasnow of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Glasnow was last year's MiLBY winner as top starter. He's back in the running this year. Another great season for him, a young right-hander in the Pirates organization. Alex Reyes, who we've talked about a lot. He was a Jake Steiner favorite, of course. Rest in peace, Jake. That fireballing right-hander in the St. Louis Cardinals organization who's got a fastball that touches triple digits and is just filthy. Blake Snell, our guy from last week in episode number 27. You can check out that episode and hear our interview with Blake. 15-5 overall record, a 1.41 ERA this season. He was unranked entering the year on MLB.com's top 100 list. He's now number 41 out of the 2015 season. Another Cardinals prospect is right-hander Luke Weaver. 1.62 ERA with Class A Advanced Palm Beach. And rounding things out, our very own Jake Steiner lookalike in the Chicago Cubs minor league pitcher of the year, Ryan Williams, who spent his season with Class A South Bend and then jumped over a Class A Advanced and made it all the way to Double A, where he was outstanding for the Tennessee Smokies. Sam, give me some of your initial reactions about starting pitchers.
Yeah, and we mentioned him a couple times there. Blake Snell is the first guy who jumps out to me. If you get a chance after listening to our podcast here, go back one episode. If this is your first time listening to us, go back and listen to Blake Snell, have him talk about his big year. Because it was really an historic season for him, as you mentioned, 1.41 ERA, 163 strikeouts in 134 innings. Guy who went to 3 different levels, finished out at the top level of the minors at AAA Durham. Was setting, I think he led all the minors in ERA with that 1.41 mark. That's the lowest for a full season minor leaguer since Justin Verlander was in there, just to give you some sort of context for the season he had. So I think any discussion you have to have about, particularly this MiLBYs category, but just starting pitcher of the year in general has to start with him. Jose Barrios, so we have him at the top of the list. That's just kind of alphabetic, but the way he pitched at both AA and AAA this year, got a lot of strikeouts, 175, pitched a lot of innings, 166 1/3. That's a lot for, a guy in the minors. A lot of times they don't want to ride a guy's arm unless he, shows the durability, and that's certainly something he did, and he showed effectiveness with a 2.87 ERA between Rochester and AA. Chattanooga this year for the Twins. So those are kind of 2 guys that immediately come out to me. I am a big guy on strikeouts, so the Alex Reyeses, the Jose De Leon's, guys who had, and Tyler Glasnow's, guys who were touching double digits in strikeouts per 9 innings. I mean, those really stand out for me. I think Jacob Faria is going to be a little bit of a favorite amongst the crowd. He went 17-4 for those of you who like wins and losses, or who really look at a record. A sub-2 ERA. Average more than a strikeout per inning. I think a lot of people are going to like him. Kind of interesting from at least prospect standpoint. MLB.com doesn't currently have him ranked amongst their top 30 prospects in the Rays system. I think they want to see how he does at slightly higher levels. He was very good with Montgomery this year. We'll see what he does hopefully next year with Durham before he gets some real prospect consideration. But he did everything you want to see. So between him and Snell, the Rays are certainly well represented, and like you said, the Tigers with Fulmer and Boyd getting a couple of guys who, getting them in trades and really bolstering them. They have 2 candidates as well. So I think it kind of starts with Snell and goes from there. But depending on what stats you want to look at, whether it's innings pitched, lots of strikeouts, really low ERA, there's no bad candidate on here. It was tough to get down, whittle this down to 10 guys.
That is, this category is among the strongest that we have out there. And one of the statistical numbers that I think really kind of gives you a snapshot of how good these guys are. Of all of these pitchers, only one had a fielding independent pitching over 3, and he actually didn't even make our final cut. That was Jorge Lopez in the Milwaukee Brewers organization. Everybody else is a sub-2 fielding independent pitching rating, and that is, to quote the Fangraphs definition, stat that estimates a pitcher's run prevention independent of the performance of their defense. It's based on outcomes that do not involve defense, strikeouts, walks, hit by pitches, and home runs allowed. It uses those statistics and approximates a pitcher's ERA, assuming average outcomes on balls in play. So if you have a fielding independent pitching rating that's better than your ERA, it kind of shows that you were let down a little bit by your defense. And there's one guy who really stands out to me in that regard, and that's Alex Reyes.
Right.
Reyes' his season-long ERA was 2.49, but his FIP, his FIP, was 1.85. And again, 151 strikeouts against 49 walks in 101 1/3 innings. That's already, I mean, it's a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, and it's more than obviously a strikeout. I mean, it's basically a strikeout and a half per inning. And for a guy who is that young and at that level to be commanding the ball that well, be striking out a whole ton of guys, that's very advanced for the Class A advanced level. That's what really stands out to me. I mean, obviously, Reyes, what we know, you know, as Sam noted, there's a whole lot of things that are not captured in a win-loss record. He had a 5-7 record this season. He only goes 101 1/3 innings, which is low compared to a lot of other guys on this list, but his numbers just jump out at you with how absurd his strikeouts and the power in that arm. 13.4 Ks per 9 this season. So he's definitely on there for me. I agree. Jose Barrios, I think, is one of those guys that was fun for us to watch because over the offseason, you know, he'd post videos of himself flipping tires on a beach and doing all this crazy stuff and getting ready for 2015 and, you know, always with his push the game hashtag. And you kind of got to follow what Barrios was doing, and it seemed like he was as dedicated or more dedicated, accurate or not. It seemed like he was at the head of that list because of what he projects in his attitude and in his approach to every start and being ready to go out every 5 days. He puts together another season that highest drafted pitcher ever out of Puerto Rico. A lot of people didn't really know what to expect out of him, but it looks like he's the real deal in that organization. Those two guys definitely stand out for me. And then Blake Snell. I mean, you can't discount what Blake Snell did, going over 3 levels, starting the season with 49 straight scoreless innings, and then finishing up with AAA Durham in a way that made you realize, okay, this isn't just a kid dominating levels that he's better than. He gets up to the AAA level and is outstanding there as he was everywhere else. And so, like you said, I mean, way too many good guys to nominate in this category, but I think it's a good list of 10. And those, I don't want to face. If I was a hitter, I wouldn't want to face any of them.
No, that's certainly true. That is not exactly a menu of pitchers you would want to order off of.
Top relief pitcher of the season. We'll start in the Cleveland Indians organization with right-hander Sean Armstrong, who saw some time this season with the AA Akron Rubber Ducks. Also got a couple of call-ups to Cleveland. Did not allow a run over his over his first 6 outings there. A couple of Diamondbacks pitchers. Right-hander Silvino Bracco, who is in the AA level for the Arizona Diamondbacks, also saw some time starting the season at Class A Advanced. Finished up in Arizona. Left-hander Zach Curtis started with the Class A Kane County Cougars, led the minor leagues with 33 saves. Baltimore Orioles organization, Oliver Drake was an outstanding arm this year, one of their co-minor league pitchers of the year, along with Michael Givens, another reliever in that system. Drake finished his season, a couple of call-ups to Baltimore. His debut was 3 scoreless innings there, but saw the majority of his time with the AAA Norfolk Tides. Paul Fry, a right-hander in the Mariners system, got started a little bit slowly, but got a promotion out of Class A Advanced to the AA level. Kyle Grana, who's in the St. Louis Cardinals organization. Jeff Johnson, another right-hander in the Indian system. Ryan Kelly. Great story, Ryan Kelly, a Tommy John guy, and a guy who's come back to be very, very strong at the AAA level in the Brave system. Jake Smith in the Giants organization, and finally Zach Weiss in the Cincinnati Reds organization. A lot of times relievers in minor league baseball are kind of tough to nail down because you don't really know. Guys who are successful as relievers in the minor leagues oftentimes find their way back into starting roles, so you don't know if this is necessarily the role that they're going to have going forward in their careers. But based on this season, this is a very dominant crop also.
Yeah, and the one who really stuck out to me, you mentioned he led the minors in saves, and like you said, it's kind of difficult to look at these guys in terms of certain numbers when it comes to minor league relievers, just because everybody's got a different role, and just because you're a closer now doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a closer later, and different managers have different theories on how to use relievers. But the guy who stood out to me was Zach Curtis. a guy in the D-backs organization, had a really good year last year for Hillsborough. I think I wrote about him in the midseason. I gave him a midseason MiLBY when I was just kind of making those myself, and everybody was going crazy for him in the D-backs organization. A lot of people are kind of down on him because he's 5'9", but man, the guy puts up numbers. He had a 1.33 ERA this year, and a 1.00 ERA last year. 33 saves and 36 opportunities, struck out 75 in 54 innings. That's with only 12 walks. So we're talking about, roughly a 6-to-1, strikeout to walk ratio. That's exactly what you want to see. His whip was really low at 0.83. When we were kind of going through guys, I think he was the first on my list just because, he had those 33 saves, but then you look stronger at his resume, and it just gets stronger and stronger as you look. And, you mentioned Oliver Drake. I wish we could get Michael Givens on here too. They were both awarded for their years in the Orioles system, but for Drake, sub-1 ERA, which is exactly what you want to see when you're looking at relief pitchers in terms of these categories. There are just so many relievers in the minors. It's tough to stand out, so you really need to put up numbers like he did. 0.82 ERA, 66 strikeouts, 44 innings, a 0.89 whip. When your ERA is lower than your whip and your whip is still pretty good, that's a really good sign. He was perfect in terms of saves, 23 for 23. Pitched at that high level in Norfolk. So he's a guy who really stuck out to me. For me, it was really between those two guys, Curtis and Drake. Silvino Bracco was another guy too. But what about for you, Tyler, when you were looking at this list? Who kind of jumped out for you?
Yeah, just touching on Oliver Drake right there, he's such a cool story. And that, it doesn't necessarily factor into our voting here, but if you don't know Oliver Drake's story, he's a product of the United States Naval Academy. He was a 43rd round draft pick in 2008 and took 8 seasons in the minor leagues to make his climb to the big leagues. And when you look over his minor league stats, there are a whole lot of pretty unremarkable seasons in there, especially when he got started as a professional. 2008, he was very good. Pitching at some lower levels is kind of an older guy at Bluefield and Aberdeen and the Appy League and the New York Penn League. But 2009, a 4.34 ERA in 25 games for Class A Delmarva. Not very good in 2010, a 4.92 ERA in 24 games, 21 of those starts for Class A Advanced Frederick. Early on in his career, I think you looked at Oliver Drake as, again, he's a nice story, came out of the Naval Academy, whatever it is. But for him to convert himself into a reliever, not just a reliever, but a dominant reliever, shows you that there was a whole lot of athleticism and a whole lot of aptitude in his ability to change his game and turn him into something very successful. And that's really cool. The guys who make those really long, arduous climbs to the major leagues, those are some of the most fun guys for us to watch and the most rewarding for major league organizations to watch. So I think Oliver Drake is a really good contender for this. Like we said, he was the Orioles co-minor league pitcher of the year with Michael Givens, who's another crazy story. He was drafted as a shortstop and converted to a pitcher. But aside from Oliver Drake, another guy who I sort of mentioned was an interesting one in that I don't think he was really on a whole lot of people's radar is Ryan Kelly. And Kelly made a couple of appearances up at the major league level this year. Didn't have a whole lot of success there. 17 appearances for the Atlanta Braves, 7.02 ERA at the major league level. But at the minor league level, this is a journeyman guy who's been in 4 different organizations, and this year looked like one of those guys you think, how do you miss on a guy like this? Combined 41 appearances between AA Mississippi and AAA Gwinnett, a 4-2 record, a 0.77 ERA, and a whip of 0.89. He struck out 48 in 47 innings, and again, a Tommy John guy who was initially a prospect drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates, then was with the Texas Rangers, then was with the San Diego Padres, now he's with the Braves. Those guys sometimes take a little while to find themselves, and Ryan Kelly was a high school guy out of Hilton Head High School in South Carolina, and now 27 years old, but he's getting things figured out. And even though it didn't translate necessarily to a whole lot of success at the major league level this year, it seems like he's found himself, and he's one of those very under-the-radar guys who I think kind of gives the Braves one of those diamonds, maybe one of those gems that they didn't expect to find to add to a bullpen going forward. We know with all the talent that they're acquiring to start rebuilding that organization. So maybe a couple guys who aren't necessarily the traditional types of prospects, but put together some really impressive 2015 seasons.
Yeah, and you made a good point there is that, this is a fan vote. You can vote for whatever you like. If you like a really good guy's story, by all means, vote for. There's reasons why we put them on this list over others. And, everybody who's listening to this, you're free to vote however you want. We're being your guides here, but yeah, look into these guys. They all have interesting backstories that we can, we can't necessarily discuss in just short little blurbs either on the podcast or on here. But yeah, vote for however your heart feels, I guess.
It's a fan vote. And again, you can
vote
at MiLB.com/MiLBY, voting from October 7th through the 27th. Top offensive player is next, and we'll start it off in the Texas Rangers organization. Lewis Brinson, who Sam talked to for a great tool shed piece a couple of weeks back. Go check that out. Brinson, fantastic season this year. First rounder in 2012, and really starting to come into his own as well. Max Kepler, another fascinating story, a German-born prospect, and not like a kid who was born on an Air Force base somewhere with American parents. This is a German kid, Max Kepler, who made his major league debut, got his first major league hit over the weekend as well in the Minnesota Twins organization, was the Southern League MVP this year. Trey Mancini in the Baltimore Orioles organization spent the bulk of this season at Double-A Bowie. Jose Martinez in the Kansas City Royals organization, and Martinez is one of those guys who we talked about as kind of a snub, it felt like, at the end of the season. Not a whole lot of people had realized what he had done in the PCL for Triple-A Omaha, but he's on this list, top offensive player of the season. Jorge Mateo, shortstop in the New York Yankees organization, who just blazed his way to 82 stolen bases this season. And a lot of times you'll see a guy do that and, the average is way down or the OBP isn't necessarily that good. Not the case for Mateo, who had a great season. Brett Phillips, one of our guys who we have somehow not had on the podcast yet, which is odd. But Brett Phillips, yeah, exactly. Brett Phillips in the Brewers system now, of course, traded by the Houston Astros in July. A.J. Reed in the Astros organization, one of the contenders for every single minor league player of the year award throughout the industry. Reed with just a phenomenal season between Class A Advanced Lancaster and Double-A Corpus Christi. Domingo Santana, yet another former Astros prospect, now in the Brewers system, was included in that same deal, the Carlos Gomez trade that sent Brett Phillips from Houston to Milwaukee. He finished the year with the Triple-A Colorado Springs Sky Sox in his minor league days. Corey Seager, who has gone from being top prospect to really an integral part of what the Los Angeles Dodgers are trying to accomplish going into the postseason, the shortstop prospect there, and the number 2 prospect in all of baseball, and Tyler White, corner infielder in the Astros organization. So we have not just 2 Astros prospects on this list, but 2 former Astros prospects on this list. So 4 of the 10 here are Astros prospects, basically drafted and developed. And it shows you, again, what the Houston Astros are doing and have been doing. But Sam, some of your standouts for top offensive prospect.
Yeah, we'll kind of touch on the Astros again later. Best farm system is a MiLBY category. So they are certainly, spoilers a little bit, but they are nominated for that as well. I kind of want to focus on some of the guys who we didn't necessarily think would be here at the beginning of the year. We do have a breakout prospect thing too, but, just some of the guys who, like we said, there are certain guys who we expected them to perform like this. Corey Seager, A.J. Reed, we at least thought that this was possible given the way he had performed in college and in his first season last year. Domingo Santana, another guy with that potential, at least in the minors, hadn't shown it in the majors yet. But Trey Mancini with Bowie and in Baltimore this year just really, it tore the cover off the ball. Not exactly a guy we expected to see this out of. Had a 341, 375, 563 slash line over this year. He's a 23-year-old. He was an 8th-round pick back in 2013 out of Notre Dame. A little old for some of the levels he played at. He played mostly at Bowie this year, like you said, but was also at High A Frederick. But 43 doubles, 6 triples, 21 homers. I mean, he was showing plenty of power, both gap to gap and over the wall. We like to see these kinds of stories where guys surprise us. If baseball was predictable, then it would be kind of boring. So Trey Mancini kind of coming on the scene like that was nice to see. Jose Martinez, I wanted to make sure he was on this list.
It's a great inclusion too, because like we said, people forgot about him a lot.
Right, and this is not a prospect of the year category. This is straight up who is the best offensive player of the year in the minors. And for him, hitting 384 for Omaha this year, played a little time in the Arizona League, which drops his average down to 382, if you can believe that. But hit 384 in Omaha, had a 461 on base percentage, an OPS above 1,000. This is a guy who he's 27 years old. He's 6'7". Again, a little old, but he's a beast of a guy, has a really big strike zone. Sometimes that's hard to control for bigger guys, and he had no problem with that. We'd love to see him getting a chance, elsewhere. had some experience in the White Sox system and the Braves system. So now, this is something that really puts him on the map. We talked plenty. We've talked to, AJ Reed. Like you said, I had that tool shed on Lewis Brinson. Go check that stuff out. Read plenty on those other guys. But, there are some guys who we not, in 100 years would have guessed would be on this list, and it's nice to see them. What about for you? Who do you have on here? I know you said Brett Phillips would love to be a guy we'd have on the pod soon if you're listening, Brett.
Brett, give us a call. Shoot us a text. And Sam pointed out something that is, like we talked about a minute ago, it's a fan vote. But these categories are not based on prospect status. They're based on the best performances this season. So top offensive player, if you haven't heard of Jose Martinez, maybe he's an older guy. You haven't heard of some of these guys because they aren't necessarily in that prospect conversation. They're included because of what they did this year as offensive performers, and that goes throughout these categories. I mean, obviously, breakout prospect and farm system of the year, those are kind of more prospect-oriented. But just to clarify, and some of these guys, if you haven't heard some of these names, a couple of guys really stand out to me. Max Kepler is certainly one of them. This year, Double-A for the first time, second in the Southern League with a 322 average, 112 games he played there. He led the league with a 947 OPS. And the thing about Max Kepler is, like we said, he's a German-born prospect, and a lot of times those guys take a lot longer to develop at the plate. And it's simply because of the fact that they don't have the exact same reps. When you grow up in a country that doesn't play a whole lot of baseball, you are a guy who comes up short in the innings that you've seen, the amount of pitches that you've seen. That hasn't really been the case in Max Kepler's career. The stuff that he's been able to do in his minor league career has been pretty impressive for a guy that, let's face it, does not have the same exposure as a 22-year-old American kid or a 22-year-old Dominican kid or whatever it may be. Over the course of his minor league career, though, this year, by far the best, and he does it at the most difficult level. 322, 416, 531 is his slash line. He homered 9 times. He drove in 71 runs. Just a terrific season from wire to wire, and overshadowed on that team, too. I mean, that was a team included Byron Buxton, included Miguel Sano at a time this year. So Kepler really stands out to me. And, I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but A.J. Reed, you can't overstate what A.J. Reed did across 2 levels this season. 135 games, a slash line of 340, 432, 612 with 34 homers and 127 runs batted in. There's not a whole lot else we can say about A.J. Reed. We had him on the podcast as well a few weeks ago, so go back and check out that interview. But he definitely stands out among a very, very good crowd.
Yeah, and those are just straight up video game numbers. I mean,
absolutely.
That's, again, the minors is so big, and there's so many different teams, so many different players, that you do have to put those numbers to stand out. And when we're dwindling this down to just 10 offensive players, it is the absurd that stands out. And A.J. Reed just had, even by MiLBY standards, one of the most absurd seasons that I've seen since my 4 years working here. So in recent memory, A.J. Reed just sticks out all the more. Certainly one of the favorites, but people can vote however they want. So we'll see how that I'll be interested to see how that shakes out.
Breakout prospect of the 2015 season. Buckle in, by the way, everybody, because we're going full bore analyzing all these categories. So in case you were thinking, all right, I can't wait for them to get to best farm system, it's a couple categories away. We got some stuff to get to before that. Breakout prospect of the 2015 season. Again, a lot of guys who maybe were not part of the conversation coming into this season. And one of those guys really starts off this list. Orlando Arcia, shortstop in the Brewers organization, who was 20 years old mostly this season at Double-A and just took off for the Biloxi Shuckers. Arcia, we'll talk about him, I have a feeling, but he definitely stands out among this crowd. Lewis Brinson, as we discussed a minute ago, was in that category for top offensive player in the Ranger system. Michael Conforto has been great this year for the New York Mets. A very pivotal piece of that team. Really had a great minor league season. It was one of those guys that everybody was kind of waiting on for this to happen, and maybe did it a little bit younger, I think, than a lot of people expected as well. Jose De Leon, who last year had a breakout season, this year follows it up with another one. Michael Fulmer, that trade piece that we talked about, who's now with the Tigers organization, was part of the Mets system and was their number 17 prospect coming into this year. Amir Garrett, who we've talked about a lot in the Cincinnati Reds organization at the Class A advanced level this year, fantastic season. Jacob Nottingham, yet another trade piece, and a really good year in an offensive-friendly league. Be really interested to see what he does next year as he continues to climb the ladder, catcher in the A's system. Brett Phillips, once more in the conversation, now in the Brewers organization. A.J. Reed, the Astros prospect, and Blake Snell, the Rays prospect. Some of the guys who we've already discussed a little bit in these other categories, but this is maybe the toughest category for us to decide, because just like it was the year of the prospect at the major league level, it seems like it was the year of the prospect in the minor league level in the way that certain guys started to separate themselves in this conversation.
Yeah, and the thing about breakout is it is a subjective word. I mean, there is no way that, the offensive player, starting pitcher, relief pitcher, as we discussed, there are certain stats you can kind of break that all down. You can say this guy's ERA was better than this guy's and yada yada. It's tough to measure just how much of a breakout it was for these guys. We can look at rankings. If you go to the page where the ballot is, we discuss a little bit how much guys have climbed. In terms of Arcia, he was a guy who started the year number 88. Now he's number 12. That's a little bit of hard data, but it's kind of hard to look at, just how big a breakout it was for one player over another. So, this is a subjective category that makes it a little more fun for you voting at home. But in terms of standout guys for me, we talked a lot about these guys, as you said already, in the other categories, so I'll kind of touch on guys we haven't discussed yet. Jacob Nottingham is one of those guys. A guy, he went from the Astros, and again, we're bringing up the Astros, went from the Astros to the A's organization in the Scott Kazmir trade. This was a guy who hadn't hit higher than 247 in the Gulf Coast League back when he was getting a start in the minors. This year he hit 316, had a 372 OBP, 505 slugging percentage. This was a guy who really just broke out with the bat. The A's are going to have to try to figure out whether they think he's more of a catcher or a first base type. But he did hit 17 home runs this year at 33 doubles, so the power is coming there. Really grew into his own, and for me, that's the definition of a breakout. I touched on Arcia a little bit briefly there, but he was the cog for the really good Biloxi team this year. Helped carry them through a difficult stretch. Hit 307. Had 25 stolen bases. Like I said, he went from number 88 to number 12. A big part of that is his defense. It was so plus. It's all he needs to do is hit, and that's exactly what he did at AA this year. We'll be interested to see how much he can carry that to some of the higher levels. See if he can get a chance at the majors next year. But he was a guy who really, really improved his stock this year. And like you said, Michael Conforto. We expected him to be good. He was a first rounder, but he arrived on the scene a little earlier than we were expecting for a guy who started in high A and was really banging down the door at Binghamton. His numbers are actually better at AA than they were at high A. Some of that is it's hard to hit in the Florida State League, but you want to see at least him meet those numbers, and he exceeded them. Hit 312 with 396 on base percentage, 503 slugging in 45 games with the B Mets this year. And obviously now, has helped carry the Mets to their first NL East titles since 2006, and part of a really, really good outfield over there in Queens. We've gone through a lot of these guys. These guys have broken out, and that they've gone into other categories, for being top offensive player, top starting pitcher. But it's up to you guys to kind of decide how do you define, a breakout star. So that's kind of the way I look at it. It's guys we weren't talking about at the beginning of the year who we're talking about now. But what about for you, Todd?
Well, for whatever reason, I think listening to the way that guys in certain organizations talk about their guys on this list is what has influenced me most. And in that conversation, Orlando Arcia stands out because the way that his coaching staff, the way that his teammates talk about him is like they have developed some sort of secret technology that's going to save the world. And that's coming into the year. I mean, a prospect, a very highly ranked prospect in his organization, not really in the conversation of the best prospects in baseball, but for him to do what he did this season at AA, and with the defense that he plays, with the speed that he brings, Arcia seems like the whole package. And in an organization that was desperately in need of guys like that, especially homegrown guys like that. I mean, you acquire Brett Phillips, you acquire Domingo Santana, but to draft, sign, develop guys and bring them up, they needed somebody like Arcia to start to separate himself. And what he did with Biloxi this year, 307, 347, 453 slash line in 129 games, just listening to the way that his teammates and his coaching staff talk about him seems like the rest of the world maybe had missed on him before this season, and it's because the numbers were not that good. But obviously the ability and the athleticism are there, and he finally started to put it all together this season. That's what really impressed me the most about Orlando Arcia. And, I think Blake Snell has to be in this conversation very highly ranked, because last year you could have probably said the same thing about Blake Snell, but this year he really made it known that last year wasn't a blip. This was the guy that the Rays thought they were getting when they drafted him in the first round. A little bit slow to develop. They limited his innings. Some of his numbers were not that good at the lower levels. Class A really stands out. He struggled at Bowling Green. But over the last couple of seasons, he's been the guy, and that's what you need from those first-round picks. So Blake Snell, we can't talk about him enough, and really the quality that he's been able to put together level to level, start to start, at bat to at bat. He doesn't slouch. He never runs into those ruts that he hit at the lower levels when he was younger. So I think he's, maybe a little bit more along the lines of some of those glamour prospects that you hear about, but as opposed to somebody like Arcia who's kind of under the radar. But you can't discount what he did. A.J. Reed obviously has to be there as well, because Reed, we hadn't really seen a lot of last year, where he spent some time in short season leagues. But this season, you can't go wrong with those guys, because once you have those huge campaigns, then all of a sudden everybody knows this is who I have to attack in this lineup, or this is how I have to approach this guy who's a really, really good dominant arm. Those three guys to me stand out as they're going to be the headliners of whatever team they're on next year going forward. We talked to Blake Snell about how he's planning on competing for a rotation job with the Rays next season. A.J. Reed, will see him at the AA and AAA levels likely next year. Arcia could be in Milwaukee very, very quickly. So those are going to be headliner guys going forward, and they lead, at least what I think, out of those 10, which is, like I said, maybe the most difficult one for us to have discussed and made our determinations from this season. Best team is a tough one as well, because we saw a lot of really, really good rosters at the beginning of the season, as we do every year, dominate in the first half, then get kind of broken up in the second half, and teams look different at the finish than what they do at the start, especially prospect-laden teams. But here are our 10 contenders for best team of the year, the most dominant club in the minor leagues in 2015. The Biloxi Shuckers, AA Southern League champions this year, the best record in the regular season in the Southern League at 78-59. Bowie Bay Sox, Eastern League champions, the Orioles AA affiliate, the Chattanooga Lookouts, who won the Southern League. I should clarify that. Biloxi was the Southern League's regular season best record. Chattanooga gets the Southern League championship. AA Corpus Christi Hooks, in that loaded Astros organization, 7 minor league affiliates made the playoffs there, as well as their major league club. AAA Columbus, Governor's Cup winners, AAA Fresno, PCL, and AAA championships, with the Houston Astros highest levels of prospects there. The GCL Red Sox, a repeat title for them in the Gulf Coast League at the rookie level. AA Midland Rockhounds, they repeated as well in the A system in the Texas League. Quad Cities River Bandits, surprise, another Astros affiliate in Class A. And the Savannah Sand Gnats, who had 18 games straight with victories before that weird tie that ended that winning streak, but were one of the best teams wire to wire in the minors. Sam, your thoughts, because this is another one it's so tough to quantify because of how different teams look from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and maybe that's the conversation, the teams that were best throughout the season despite all the change.
Yeah, and I will kind of start at the end there. Everybody likes to talk about trophies, and the only team with 2 trophies on here is the Fresno Grizzlies, having won the Pacific Coast League and the AAA National Championship, beating fellow best team contender Columbus. So view that as you will, but Fresno was kind of wire to wire, just one of those really stacked teams. They had Carlos Correa at one point this year, and then he moved on.
I remember that.
Yeah, if you can think back to that time. They had Mark Appel, they had Domingo Santana at one, for a good chunk of the year before he moved on to the Brewer system. Tony Kemp, Tyler White. I mean, this was just a packed roster, a roster that we were going to spend a lot of time looking at, and they really followed through with expectations. Sometimes you want to give best team necessarily to a team that didn't or performed better than expectations, kind of exceeded themselves. But the Grizzlies met kind of high expectations we already had for them. And like I said, we're the only team on here with 2 trophies. Another one I really liked, just because of the story, was Biloxi. They were kind of really road warriors this year, opened the season with a 54-game road trip, but still won the Southern League South Division first half title. had the best regular season, had a record. They went 78-59, had the best team ERA. For a team that could have had any excuse for not doing well at the beginning of the year, they went above and beyond expectations there, led by Arcia, as we were talking about, and kind of staying in that same league. I liked what you said a couple podcasts ago about Chattanooga. A really prospect-laden team. Byron Buxton, Miguel Sano, Jose Barrios was there. Max Kepler broke out. Jorge Polanco was really good. Adam Brett Walker was hitting homers left and right. This was a really, really prospect-laden team, but at the same time, they came around. They had a really good first half, not so good second half, but still won the Southern League Championship at a time when that city really needed, something to gather around, and given the tragedy that happened there in Chattanooga. There's a whole bunch of different storylines. It's not just straight up records and trophies to go along here. But for me, it's those three teams: Fresno, Biloxi, and Chattanooga that stood out for me. But what about for you, Tom?
Fresno definitely, I think, kind of stands alone to me just because wire to wire they were so good. And again, Chattanooga is kind of the same way that you see some of the top talent disappear and that team is still so good. And that's maybe the more impressive thing than just, being good wire to wire, is the fact that this isn't like a major league club where it's, there's going to be some changes here and there, but you have the same core group of guys all vying for the same goal. In the minor leagues, you could have an entirely different roster at the end of the season than you do at the beginning of the year. And in a case like Chattanooga, you could be a team that's pretty mediocre in the second half and still ride your first half division title, get into the playoffs, and really make some noise because of the ability to know what it takes, because of the guys who were there in the first half of the season. Teams like Chattanooga, teams like Fresno, that's really impressive to me. Those two really stand out. Fresno, it just seemed like had that team of destiny feel. I don't know what it was about them, but all season this year just seemed like they were destined for some pretty big stuff. And one team that I think is going to be forgotten in this, but shouldn't be, the Savannah Sandgnats. And, they swept their division in the South Atlantic League, did not win a championship this year, but, had that 18-game winning streak. And there were so many times this year when you would look at what Savannah was doing and think, man, that team is loaded. And it's kind of bittersweet because it's the last team for Savannah. That team is moving to Columbia next year, so that fan base obviously gets to, say goodbye to their team with a really good taste in their mouths, I guess, of what they were able to accomplish this season. They're going to be kind of one of the ones that I think probably is forgotten among some of the heavier hitters this year, but they were a really fun story to watch this season as well.
Yeah, and we love winning streaks, obviously. We love winning streaks that end in ties.
That end in ties.
Yeah. If 2016 wants to learn anything from 2015, that might be it.
Have some weird things happen. Guys missing home plate on homers and ties and all kinds of stuff. Best farm system. Again, I'm going to say this for everyone, but really tough one to determine here. Here we are. Here's the list. We'll go through all 10, and I think there's probably one that stands out, but there are a whole lot that stand out for maybe 1A. The Arizona Diamondbacks, Chicago Cubs, the Houston Astros, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Minnesota Twins, the New York Mets, the New York Yankees. There's a couple of teams you probably didn't figure would be in this conversation 5 years or so ago. The Philadelphia Phillies, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Tampa Bay Rays. Sam, fire away.
Yeah, well, I think the one you're kind of acknowledging, we've said it several times here, is the Astros. Just at every level, we were talking about playoff teams. Correa moved up. Reed broke out. There were other guys. Michael Feliz, we haven't talked about. Francis Martez, I think, was a breakout candidate. He was at least number 11 or 12 on my list, so I wish he could have snuck on there for our nominees there. Derek Fisher, Joe Musgrove, that team in Lancaster, that just tore it apart. We've already talked about Fresno. Corpus Christi was a nominee for best team. And it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody that their organization had a collective .553 winning percentage, which is tops among all the organizations. And then it only got better with the addition of first rounders Alex Bregman, Daz Cameron, and Kyle Tucker. This is not a system that just performed this year. It's a system that's performed to build upon that and going forward. And we're not necessarily expecting them to repeat what they did this year next year, because a lot of guys are going to move up, a lot of guys are going to graduate. And this is just so difficult to repeat a year like this. But I think the Astros are certainly number one. Everybody's kind of fighting for 1A. But in that conversation, I think we have to acknowledge the Twins, the way they churned out talent again this year. It goes beyond Buxton and Sano, guys who have only just moved up. Barrios, Kepler, we talked about them. Steven Gonsalves, another guy who really broke out. The Mets churned out talent that helped the team, at the highest level. Syndergaard, Matz, Conforto all moving up, and being key pieces of that NL East winning team. And Gavin Cecchini, Dominic Smith, top 100 guys now. One I really want to just kind of touch on before I turn it over to you, Tyler, was the Phillies. The team itself, the major league team, did not really do very well, but I really liked them in terms of not necessarily the performances that happened on the field this year for its minor league affiliates, but the way the system itself got stronger. It was already really top heavy with J.P. Crawford and Aaron Nola. Nola, as we know, is in the majors now. Has been performing pretty well there. Moved up pretty quick. Crawford, he's in the conversation with Seager as best shortstop prospect in the minors right now. That Cole Hamels trade, they really got a good, significant chunk of talent from the Rangers and Jake Thompson, Nick Williams, and Jorge Alfaro. In terms of what we like to talk about in terms of farm system and prospects, they really enriched an already good system with those three additions. And in terms of best farm system, I think they have to be in the discussion that they built a better farm system than what they started out the year with.
Man, what an oasis that is for Phillies fans to hear, too.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, they need something to look forward to given the way the team performed this year. They had some nice pieces. I think Audubel Herrera did better this year than any of us were expecting. But they need something to kind of sink their teeth into and provide that there is hope. And I think with those additions, there at least is some hope, at least for the Phillies going forward.
I will say that if I had to rank these farm systems based on photos, Dansby Swanson's dreamy smile for the Arizona Diamondbacks and the picture that we have up for him.
Dansby Swanson.
Friend of the podcast, Dansby Swanson. Yeah. Just that dreamy grin that he has there in his photo. I think the Houston Astros are a cut above, and I'll tell you why. These are the postseasons in the Astros organization this year. The Houston Astros in the American League, Fresno Grizzlies AAA champions, Corpus Christi Hooks at AA, Lancaster Jethawks at Class A Advanced, Quad Cities River Bandits at Class A, Greenville at rookie level, the Tri-City Valley Cats, not the Tri-City Dust Devils, Tri-City Valley Cats at the New York Penn League, short season Class A level, and the DSL Astros Blue. The only Astros minor league affiliate that missed the postseason was the DSL Astros Orange. So they had a team in the playoffs in that league, just not their other team. That, to me, the talent level, and we read off these nominees in all these other categories, and even the guys who are nominated are former Astros prospects. The Astros, to me, are just a cut above, and remember the way that people, old-style, old-time, old-guard baseball people just ripped this Astros rebuild? That's so comical now, because the Astros at the major league level are into the playoffs probably a year earlier than everybody thought they would be, and they're only going to get better from here. So the Astros, to me, I think they are the team in this category, but there's a lot of other very worthy contenders. The Chicago Cubs, I think to an extent, will not necessarily have the same level of discussion as the Astros because their guys made impacts at the major league level so much earlier with Chris Bryant and Kyle Schwarber and those types of guys, Addison Russell the same way. But the big steps that they had in the minor league level were taken at the lower end. The Class A teams, the Class A advanced team, Myrtle Beach with the league title. AA Tennessee obviously had a lot of talent with Ryan Williams and guys like that. But I think the Cubs are certainly in that conversation. And like you said, the Twins, the Mets, it seems like there's the Astros and then there's everybody else. And that seems like that's the way it's been in player development for the last few years. If you're an Astros fan, man, you stuck it out through some just garbage for a while for some very good reasons because your team is a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, and kind of to switch sports a little bit. It's a little, apples and oranges, but I know the Sixers fans have been going through similar things like this. And you have this promise that don't worry, it's going to work out in the future.
Right.
It's going to work out in the future, and that's still no guarantee that it will. And playing in a wild card game, that is success for the Houston Astros, given what we expected and what we were thinking of them. So we'll see if this is just the start. There's still no guarantee, but the groundwork that is being laid right now is just so far beyond what we're seeing from other organizations that they were first one on here, they were the second one on here. I triple checked to make sure they were on here before we submitted our nominees. So, I think it starts with them. You might be a fan of one of these organizations. You can make any case you want, that's why they're on there. But yeah, I think you have to at least first consider the Astros and then think about why you wouldn't pick them if you're going to be voting elsewhere.
Jeff Lunau and Sig Maydal and Quentin McCracken and Kevin Goldstein and the staff there in Houston has just done unbelievable work, and great podcasting staff with Kevin Goldstein there as well. So the Houston Astros are probably our pick there. Our final categories we're just going to run through really quickly because they're a little bit more something that you have to see and experience for yourself on the site than what we can describe. Game of the Year, we've got 10 nominees for that. You can find the links to all those Game of the Year stories up on the site. Best Performance, Best Single Game Performance of the Year, same thing goes there. Also our Promotion of the Year, which we're going to talk about here momentarily with Benjamin Hill, and Photo of the Year as well. And then we have 3 video categories. We can't do those justice. Top Play, Top Home Run, and Best Blooper, which, that's the best category in any voting. Best Blooper. So head on to MiLB.com/MiLBY right now. Again, voting from October 7th through the 27th, and give us your take, your input, and we're going to break down the top promotions of the season with Benjamin Hill, who is back safe and sound from the promo seminar in Columbus. That's coming up next. Back in the palatial New York offices after a lengthy jaunt through to try to find a place to record. Benjamin Hill joins Sam Dykstra live and in person. Ben, to you as well. It's MiLBY's day, so we all have obviously tuxedos on, and this is we're like the Oscar nominations. I assume you're the same?
Yeah, I got a cummerbund.
Oh, what's going on, man? Back from Columbus, the promo seminar, and all of the interesting stuff that goes along with that. We covered a lot of that last week, but how was the last stretch there?
Yeah, I talked to you guys from a food court in the Columbus Convention Center last week. I'm back from the minor league baseball promotional seminar. Got back on Friday. And, as I touched on last week, it's a great chance to see a lot of people within the industry who you don't get to see, in a group setting much at all, obviously, because everyone's dealing with their own seasons. And after I talked to you guys, sat in on a lot of group therapy sessions and larger presentations in the ballroom. I got to present myself on Thursday, and if I do say so myself, it went very well. And, once I get that out of the way, then I feel pretty good about the seminar because, I carry a lot of tension before speaking. And then after that, it's just like, all right, that went okay. And we had a great gala event, ballpark party at the Clippers' home of Huntington Park, and that's a promo seminar tradition, is the host city, whatever team plays in the host city, hosts a ballpark party, and that was a lot of fun. They had a zip line in the outfield and animals from the Columbus Zoo and,
cool.
Free food and drink, and great way to say goodbye to Columbus and back in New York City on Friday, and, back to the grind here in New York City this week and for the foreseeable future.
Well, we've got a quick news item, and then we're going to dive into talking about our Promotions of the Year nominees for the 2015 MiLBY Awards. And we know that it's kind of refresh, rebrand season. And this morning, recording on Tuesday, we already had one released, and the Hickory Crawdads will have a semi-new look for 2016 and beyond. Give us kind of the breakdown of Hickory today.
Yeah, their previous logo had been done by Studio Simon, I believe. Regardless, this refresh was definitely done by Studio Simon. And as we talked about before we went on the air, quotes around the air, this is more of a refresh than a rebrand. Obviously they're keeping the same name. They're keeping some of the old marks, just kind of shuffling things around a bit, a new primary logo, some pretty cool alternate logos for the Crawdads. I think one that we all like is the state of North Carolina in light blue with a claw overlaid atop the state of North Carolina, and the claw is pinching Hickory on the map, which is represented by a star. Pretty cool visual there. It is tough to describe logos for people who aren't looking at the logo.
That's true.
But, yeah, state of North Carolina, Hickory, Crawdads, claw, star. Everything comes together very nicely with that alternate mark. And, so that's one of the first refreshes of the season. The Ogden Raptors did something similarly last month. It's going to be a little bit, at least a couple of weeks, until we see a full-on rebrand in terms of a team totally changing its look. But, hey, 'tis the season for new logos, alternate logos, uniforms, and whatnot.
Yeah, just quickly before we move on to the MiLBYs, just for the people listening, what is the difference between a refresh and a rebrand? It's a kind of a touchy subject in the world of uniforms and logos and all that kind of thing. But what's the difference between a full-on rebrand versus a refresh?
Yeah, it's funny. Again, we were talking about this before we went on the air. It is something that's been in my mind here and there is when, teams just say we've rebranded. And sometimes I just say, hey, it's rebranding season. So I'm guilty of it too. But usually what we're dealing with is not a rebrand, but a refresh, a touch-up. Because teams are not rebranding in the sense that they're changing their identity or that they're completely overhauling their logos to the extent that it's a totally new look. So I think we do all have to be careful, and UniWatch has a post on this and kind of got it in my mind a little bit more today, that it's not a rebrand. And don't say rebrand unless the team is completely overhauled, scrapped its old look and has something completely different. That's a rebrand. But we're dealing mostly with refresh, I think is the word I like to use. I'll try to come up with some other terminology as we go on, but rebrand, usually not the case. We have not seen a rebranding this offseason, and I'm not exactly sure at this moment when the next one is scheduled for.
All right, and kind of moving on, this is MiLBY Day here on the podcast. We have two of our guys who have done promo previews all year. Obviously, Ben is the go-to guy in the minors universe for that. Tyler's done a lot of helpful stuff with that this summer, and you guys kind of collaborated on coming together for our promo of the year nominees. You guys can vote on that online on the website, for the MiLBYs, but you guys go over, what kind of stood out to you during the 2015 season in terms of promotions.
Yeah, well, let me open my.
There we go.
Look at that.
Spray back on that.
I just sprayed Sam with a ginger ale. I like to open a ginger ale before I talk about minor league promos. Make
sure it's there for you to water down fire takes. You got some good takes on these promos.
It's necessary for this podcast.
Exactly. As Sam said, Tyler and I both wrote promo preview this year, especially in the second half of the season. Tyler really took it over, so the two of us collaborated on what is the traditional mode of operation with the MIL promo of the year, picking 10 promos that we believe were some of the best that minor league baseball had to offer. And the categories that we use are they're one-night promos. We're not talking about between any contests or a off-the-field charitable endeavor. All those things are great, but, we have to simplify, so we're choosing, one-day only theme nights, giveaways, and whatnot, and we picked 10. How best to go about it? Well, we have, in alphabetical order, we have the Bowie Bay Sox with the Women in Sports Night, Brooklyn Cyclones with Sid Finch Night, Eugene Emeralds with their Remembering Civic Stadium tribute, the Fresno Grizzlies with the Taco Truck Throwdown 5, Frisco Rough Riders with Full House Night, Myrtle Beach Pelicans with Deflate Cancer Night, Rochester Red Wings with the Miracle on Ice Night, Round Rock Express gave away a Willie Nelson bobblehead, Staten Island Yankees had George R.R. Martin out for Game of Thrones Night, and finally the Toledo Mudhens had a Back to the Future doubleheader in which they wore vintage, back jerseys in the first game and imagine what the future would look like with the jerseys they wore in the second game. So a lot of diverse, unique, original stuff to choose from. Tyler, are there any that you want to highlight, or among the 5 that you picked of those 10, are there any that really stand out to you or that you want to give a little more detail on?
There are, I would say 3 that really kind of stick out to me above the rest. And first is Bowie's Women in Sports Night. I think because the timing for that was very, very cool. It was just a couple of weeks after the women's national team won the World Cup, and that was the big sports headline of the summer, which now, it feels like we're so far away from that. It was only a few months ago, and that was really the big storyline of the summer. And just a couple weeks after that, the Bowie Bay Sox welcomed in some former members of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, of course the league that was featured in the movie A League of Their Own, and kind of the pioneers really of all women's sports in the United States. And so I thought that was really cool. That's an annual event for Bowie, but a really cool thing. Staten Island's Game of Thrones night, and I'm not a Game of Thrones guy. I've never read it. I've never watched it. But that was such a neat thing to me because of how locally tied in it was. George R.R. Martin actually based the concept of what would later become the world of Game of Thrones on Staten Island. He was a New Jersey native. He would look across the water and see Staten Island, and that was kind of the first foundation of what he wanted the Game of Thrones actual world to look like and feel like and that kind of stuff, that mystique of seeing something across the water. So for him to show up at a minor league baseball game be there on a night where the teams, I guess you could say, rebranded for a night. Staten Island was the Staten Island Dire Wolves for a night. They wore some different uniforms and logos and stuff. I thought that was really cool. He brought out some wolves, which are part of a sanctuary in New Mexico that he partners with for some charitable things. So that was really neat. I mean, just the idea that George R.R. Martin would show up at a New York Penn League game in the summer is a pretty huge step for a team, for any team to get, but I thought that was really cool. And the Fresno Grizzlies turning into the tacos for a night. Obviously, the taco truck throwdown has been a big thing for the last few years, but to take it that step further, and we talked about this when it happened, but kind of the matrix of making a promo out of a promo and being so far through the promotional looking glass the way that the Grizzlies did that, and the worldwide acclaim that those uniforms and logos blew up, the way that they got orders from all across the globe, and international news coverage was super cool. And so those three really kind of stick out to me.
Yeah, those are all great ones. And talking about Staten Island, I think it's great that they've gotten a nomination this year because through the years, they play in the New York City market. They have so much they could potentially capitalize on. And through the years, I'll just charitably say they've been underwhelming in that regard, and they get overshadowed by their fellow New York City borough team, the Brooklyn Cyclones. To see Staten Island finally hinting at the elite level they can operate at is a great thing. For me, we don't have too many giveaways on here, and one I made sure made the top 10 was the Willie Nelson bobblehead in Round Rock. I'm a big Willie Nelson fan, so a little bias there. I'm seeing him on October 17th with Merle Haggard in Reading, Pennsylvania, if anyone wants to come down and say hello. Hey, you never know. But they actually got this authorized by Willie himself. He's wearing the Express jersey. The Express, of course, play just outside of Austin, which is Willie's longtime home base. And to celebrate an icon of that stature with his own bobblehead, really transcends baseball, because that's the kind of giveaway item that people around the globe are going to want, and they're going to see a team doing that and immediately think that's super cool, that's awesome, I wish I could be there. And I think it's great when teams can really honor a local legend who transcends the region and creates interest all over the world.
And just for me, just kind of throwing out there too, was the Miracle on Ice night with Rochester. Being a big
it was really cool too.
Hockey guy myself, just kind of a couple of guys from my alma mater, Boston University, played on that Miracle on Ice team. And it was kind of a nice way to, the 35th anniversary isn't necessarily a gold and silver anniversary or anything like that, but it was a nice little tip of the hat to a team that really kind of changed a big part of our history as a country, and global politics, that whole thing. We might tie a little too much into it, but it was a nice kind of cross sport thing that we kind of hit on and got to see this summer. Yeah,
Rochester did a great job with that. One of the few promos, maybe the only one I'm aware of, in which both the visitors and home team wore a theme jersey, except that both the Red Wings and visiting Syracuse both wore different USA jerseys. Right. I really think what they should have done, Syracuse represents the USSR, but I guess that wasn't gonna fly for various reasons. But Rochester did a great job with that. Obviously, being that far north in the country and that close to Canada, they have a bigger hockey fan base than most teams. And they had alumni from the team out there. They gave away commemorative pucks. They had, the alumni shooting a first puck, to start the game. All sorts of great giveaways, all sorts of great tie-ins to the event. And this is a team that has actually hosted its own AHL hockey games in the offseason in various years. I don't think they're doing it this offseason. So there's a real precedent to celebrate hockey in Rochester, and by taking one of the greatest moments in American sports history and really celebrating it and making their own in a minor league baseball context is great.
If you went back 35 years, 1979-ish, and told a whole bunch of college kids getting set to play in the Olympic Games, 3.5 decades from now, you're going to have your own promotional night at a minor league baseball game where you'll be shooting out the first pitch. I don't think, A, anybody would have any idea what the heck you were talking about, and B, I don't think they would have found that very likely. But sports makes some pretty cool bedfellows that way. And this kind of ties us in with going back to Columbus, Ben, in the promo seminar. The Golden Bobblehead is kind of Oscar of minor league baseball, and there were some promos both in-game. There were some promos, non-game day promos that were really cool, and this kind of wraps us up. I mean, obviously, fans will get to vote on their promotions of the year. We gave you some of our favorites for our awards for the MiLBYs, but the Golden Bobblehead is an all-encompassing sort of thing that front offices around minor league baseball really aspire to contend for and to win. Tell us about that this season in Columbus, because there were a whole lot of really cool contenders for those awards.
Yeah, the MiLBY promo, which we just finished talking about, that's for the fans to decide. And the Golden Bobblehead is, picked within the industry, and the teams really care about it because the voting takes place at the promo seminar. They're honored at the ballpark party at the end of the seminar. It's a real great chance for validation among peers, and it's taken very seriously, even though at the end of the day it is a Golden Bobblehead. And yeah, there's 4 categories, and I'm going to blank on all 4, but there's theme nights, there's charitable stuff, there's non-game day. So it really runs the gamut, and there's 4 different winners in different categories, and then an ultimate winner chosen among those 4. And for the second year in a row, big surprise, the juggernaut, the dynasty, the powerhouse, Brooklyn Cyclones won it all yet again. Last year they won for Seinfeld Night, which I did attend in fan mode. I didn't cover it. I just went with some friends. And that last year was probably the most comprehensive theme night I'd ever seen in terms of the number of elements they worked into an evening. This year they won for something different. It was a non-game day event called Ambush Baseball. And I think one of the reasons it won is that so many teams could do this themselves. It's been established in recent years that sometimes teams will go to a Little League field and bring the minor league experience to the Little League field, in which they do the PA announcements and the walk-up music and the mascot and between inning contests and all that stuff. The Cyclones flipped the script with that on Ambush Baseball, and they went to a local Little League game before it started. This was all prearranged, but the kids didn't know. And they said, hey, guess what? King Henry, the MC, comes out of a bus, and he's like, hey, kids, today's game is not at your traditional home field here. It's going to be at MCU Park, home of the Cyclones. So as a total surprise, they put all these kids on the bus, took them to MCU Park, and they played a game as if they were, a professional team with all the in-game elements that includes. And the team showed a video recapping that event during the promo seminar. It just blew people away, the joy on these kids' faces. And if you can think of yourself as a child, and before the adult cynicism has crept in and destroyed us all, that would have just been such a phenomenal thing, to just be 10 years old and playing at your local Little League field, your local youth baseball field, and then just gotten sent out of nowhere to a professional facility, have your jersey hanging up in the locker room, have your own walk-up song, which they consulted with the parents beforehand. Such a cool thing, and I would fully expect other teams to pick up on that idea in 2016 and beyond.
That's what I was going to say. If there is a promo that I hope catches fire across minor league baseball and turns into something that a lot of teams, try to copy, that's it, because it is such a cool concept. And so congratulations to the Cyclones on the Golden Bobblehead Award. You can vote for your favorite promo of the year at MiLB.com right now when you check out the MiLBYs ballot for all of our categories. And there are so many, and it was tough. I mean, I know Ben and I combined to nominate 10, and there were probably 50 that we could have nominated because there were way too many good contenders this year.
Yeah, there always are. You're talking about 160 teams, and most of them playing 70 home games a year. That's a lot of promos to sort through, and I think we did a good job. Good job to us picking 10 great ones, and we'll see what emerges on top after the fans have their say.
Ben, thanks. Good to have you back.
It's good to be back. Thanks, guys.
Voting is up now, MiLB.com/MiLBY or /MiLBYs. If you want to throw an S on the end there, it'll take you to the same page, and you can give us your input for the 2015 season and the most deserving award candidates and winners for this campaign. We'll have a staff pick, we'll have a fan pick, and we'll get you all up to speed on who we think is the best in 2015 as a staff, as well as what you choose in our fan vote for the 2015 MiLBY Awards. And that's going to do it for the what did we establish, the 28th edition of the show?
28th, yeah.
28th! The 28th edition of the show. You can rate, review, and subscribe to the show before the show on iTunes. You can find us there as the Minor League Baseball Podcast. And not only is it MiLBY time, It's organization all-star time as well. Those have started to roll out on the site. The Arizona Diamondbacks are up. Got a lot more coming this week and into next week. I know I've got coming up over the next couple of weeks the Chicago White Sox and Colorado Rockies later on this offseason. I've got the Seattle Mariners and the Washington Nationals, so we're going to have those throughout the next few months. Sam, who do you have coming up?
I have the Red Sox coming up, and I also
have the
Astros. So those are
you get the Astros. Have fun with that.
Yeah, exactly. Those are almost hard to pick just because there's so much depth.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes when we go through these, it's like I really don't want to pick a guy who hit 198, but that's all I can do. And with at least my organizations, I cannot say that's the case. So.
You're going to be writing War and Peace to cover those organizations.
Yeah, we do have
15,000 word columns.
Right, we do have a pretty strict word count. We try to cut it down, but I will try my best to pump as much knowledge as I can into these Oregon All-Stars, as we all do.
So those are coming up on the site. D-backs fans, your team is first up. Also, Minor League Baseball and Rawlings named the 2015 Minor League Gold Glove Award winners, headlined by Orlando Arcia, who we discussed as one of our top breakout prospects of the season. He is one of those guys, one of those phenomenal defensive performers of the year. You can go check out that list as well at MiLBY.com. And that's going to do it for the show. Did we miss anything?
I think that's it. No, I think we had so much MiLBYs talk that this is the official MiLBYs guide. If anybody has any questions, I think they've all been answered. But feel free to, if you have any more questions, reach out to us on Twitter.
Exactly.
Send us as many questions as you may have. We'll be your guide through that space as well.
Anything that you've got, hit us on Twitter. He's at Sam Dykstra, MiLB. I'm at Tyler Maun. Minor League Baseball is at MiLB. You can also get in touch with the podcast. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns at podcast@MiLB.com. And, we're going to have a whole pile of fun with this stuff going forward. We're hoping to have some very cool conversations in the next couple of weeks as well. As like we said, instructs are underway. The Arizona Fall League is getting close, so the podcast is not going to slow down. We're hoping to catch up with Justine Siegel, who is coaching with the Oakland Athletics at instructional work for them in Mesa, Arizona. Also hoping, possibly, to catch up with Atlanta Braves prospect Touki Toussaint. That's been in the works for a while, so we're hoping to catch up with Touki, who's getting his offseason underway as well. So stay tuned to the Minor League Baseball podcast as we roll on into the 2015 offseason. And even though we spend the bulk of our time, only talking about minor league stuff, it's not like we don't watch the big league game. So, Sam, your initial – this postseason has so many teams that are giving us really their first look on a national stage. I mean, the Houston Astros, the Toronto Blue Jays, teams that have not been in this conversation for a while. But who's your favorite heading into this playoff?
Yeah, I kind of go back to a lot of prognosticators, predictors, whatever you want to call them, are going the same way. I really like the Blue Jays in the AL. That lineup is just so scary good, and then when you have the chance to throw out David Price, as many times as they're going to allow him, would any of us be surprised if he puts together not necessarily a Madison Bumgarner type performance in terms of throwing until his arm pops off, but having him out there squeezing as many innings as they can out of him. I really like the way they're set up for the postseason. In the NL, I'm going to take the Pirates. I know this is going up on Wednesday. They're going to be playing in the wild card game against the Cubs. A couple weeks ago, a friend of mine isn't the biggest baseball fan, just asked me out of the blue who I think is going to make the World Series. She's from Chicago, and I told her Blue Jays Pirates. This was, I want to say, end of August. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to take the Pirates and the Blue Jays to meet in the Fall Classic, and I might be proved wrong as early as Thursday. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, recording this on Tuesday is trouble for us because we could be picking teams that are already gone by the time this gets
out. But I don't want to back out.
No, you can't.
I really like the Mets. I do like the Mets. I would love to. I live in New York. I would love to see the World Series come to the Big Apple. But I also want to stick to my guns and pick the Pirates. So if I'm wrong on Thursday, everybody can let me know. But that's the way I'm going. What about for you?
I like the Blue Jays pick as well. I think sentimentally, I would love to see the Astros just because we've watched this system grow and this organization turn itself into a formidable force for a while. And again, by the time this goes up, the Astros could be long eliminated. But I would love to see the Houston Astros put together a run because that team is so much fun. The Blue Jays in the American League, obviously a very, very good pick, a really tough one to go against. In the National League, I feel like I could make a case for any one of those teams. The Central has been so loaded all year. You know the Cardinals are probably going to be there in the end, whether that means the NLCS or the World Series just because of their pedigree. But the Pirates, so exciting with all the talent on that team. The Cubs with all their talent, especially the guys who have come up like Schwarber and Bryant made an impact this year. It could be the time the Dodgers break through. I mean, they've got Kershaw and another Cy Young contender in Greinke, so they've got that 1-2, bit of question marks beyond that. But the way Corey Seager's played, they're a fun team to watch. And I just have a tough time going against the Mets with all those arms, with what Yoenis Cespedes has been able to bring to the offense, David Wright being back and healthy. So, I'll go Blue Jays Mets. Why not? It seems like a fun pick. And undoubtedly I will be proven wrong almost instantaneously. So enjoy the postseason, the start to the postseason in the big leagues, and we'll talk to you next week on episode number 20, whatever it'll be, 9 of the show before the show. We'll talk to you then.